Hello and Nagaseni. Assalamu alaikum. Greeting of peace to all of my dear friends, compatriots, social justice seekers, activists, political opposition groups in exile and in diaspora. This is Ahmed Youssouf Mohamed, President of Eritrean Afar National Congress, the EANC. It is a privilege for me to share with you the current state of affairs of our people, the indigenous Afar people in Eritrea. As representative organization for Eritrean Afar Nation, I want to extend a hand of solidarity with all of you for your efforts to call for unity within various opposition groups in diaspora, activists like YAKL campaigners. I do believe the reforms that are taking place in the region will somehow get inside Eritrea. Congratulations to your efforts. As the 28th independence anniversary is upon us, years of catastrophic human rights violation, never-ending refugee crisis, the emptying of youth from the nation of Eritrea continues. What has taken place in our region, and particularly the Oromo youth revolution, the Gero revolution in Ethiopia, has given a new confidence to young Eritreans to call for reform inside their own country. Even with its reclusiveness, Eritrea is not immune to popular uprising or similar regime changes that are taking place in Ethiopia, Sudan, and other parts of Africa. In my presentation here today, I'm going to speak about one of the most contentious issues that have divided the Eritrean opposition groups and activists in diaspora for years. This is the issue of implementation of Eritrea's unimplemented 1997 constitution. Most of my presentation will address the deficiencies in 1997 Eritrean constitution, but most importantly, I want to share with you the Afar experience in the past 28 years in Eritrea, the cultural, the economic, the political marginalization of our indigenous people in Eritrea. One of the most vocal groups rallying behind the implementation of 1997 constitution is the YAKL campaign, the Enough is Enough movement. I'm not here to speak negatively about the YAKL campaign. I am in support of the YAKL movement. In fact, I want to urge every Eritrean to participate and join the resistance campaign. It has given many of our young people a new hope and platform to demand for their democratic rights in Eritrea. What I want to speak about, however, is the one-dimensional messaging, or the lack of diversity in the messaging, to unite all segments of Eritrean population from different backgrounds, ethnicity, religion, to effectively mobilize all Eritreans into one direction. I appreciate and I understand the YAKL campaign means different things to different people in Eritrea. As we all know, Eritrean regime has brutally oppressed and violated human rights of all segments of Eritrean population. For some, the message of the YAKL campaign may connect with those youth groups who call to end the indefinite military conscription, or those who are concerned in the plight of the political prisoners, or for others who want to see the end of refugee crisis in Eritrea. These are all positive messaging. For others like the Afar, for example, we want the messaging to YAKL campaign to articulate the ethnic grievances, a call to end ethnic persecution against the Afar, the land expropriation and the forcible evictions, and enough with the illegal selling of Dankalia to foreign entities. For many years, the challenge we had as a democratic opposition groups in diaspora was connecting with each other's grievances and respectfully address those grievances. So my encouragement to the YAKL campaign movement is to be inclusive as possible and to include diversity in your messaging for the sake of uniting every views, every region, and every segment of Eritrean population. Coming back to the debate of the unimplemented 1997 Eritrean constitution and why the Afar Nation and Dankalia cannot support its implementation. As we all know, constitution making is one of the most important ingredients for any nation building process. It contains our fundamental rights, values, democracy, rule of law, the way we should apply those laws, the way we govern ourselves in search for a more perfect union. The unimplemented 1997 constitution is at odds with Afar vision for Eritrea, and it's against Afar rights to internal self-determination and against Afar indigenous rights to land, resources, and Afar ethnic identity. First, the 1997 constitution is a highly centralized constitution, giving all powers to the center. It is discriminatory, marginalizing to ethnicities, minorities, and other disenfranchised nations and nationalities of Eritrea. Secondly, the 1997 constitution was a product of undemocratic process, with little or no consultation with people like the Afar, and the document was a product of ideological elites of the EPLF leadership. Their model for Eritrea was meant to subdue, subjugate, and attack Eritrea's past multicultural, multi-ethnic diversity. Though the 1997 constitution seems to provide some universal democratic rights, its aim and policies are far from democratic constitution. The Afar leadership and our legal counsel, Professor Joseph Magnet, invited Dr. Barakat Habseslassie to Canada, who was the architect of the Eritrea's 1997 constitution, for a discussion among constitutional scholars, former diplomats, and regional experts. We had the privilege to challenge Dr. Barakat on the absence of the rights for indigenous ethnicities, minorities, and other Eritrea's nationalities from the 97 constitution. He acknowledged making the mistake, the absence of rights for people like the Afar from constitution. Dr. Barakat's reasoning, he said, was at the time of the constitution making, the thinking among the ruling EPLF/PFDJ leadership was heavily influenced by socialist ideologies. Socialist ideologies and those socialist ethos, he said, was a crucial point of creation of the 1997 constitution. And those EPLF values and the main principles made the hubris possible among the Eritrean leaders. And that thinking made them forget the rights of the Afar ethnicity and the rights of other diverse Eritrea's nationalities. In that he was sorry, as a Highlander, as someone from the Highlands, he did not consider those rights and the grievances of other minority nationalities. Professor Barakat goes on to say, I think that as a nation we should look at perhaps the experience of truth and reconciliation to create a framework. We need to come to terms with our mistakes. We cannot just castigate Isaias unless we admit we were part of the mistake. He goes on to say, I will profess of this mistake. With all the good will and misguided conception of the socialist visionary with the land issues, well, we now come to realize we made a mistake. We are saying so openly. If we think of truth and reconciliation, it will help us confront our past, confront our mistakes. That may lead us to importance of recognizing the dignity of the Afar and Kunama. First, recognize their identity, historically evolved identity with their cultural values, and so on. That is the beginning. We did not recognize that. We might have assumed that, but we did not. It has to be articulated. Then, of course, with the control of resources, if the Afar are given federal status, if insist on control of their sea, minerals, resources, and these are things we can discuss and negotiate. Those are the excerpts from the Professor Barakat's meeting with the Afar in year 2012. Professor Berkett can be forgiven for his misjudgment in the past. We all make mistakes. Knowing what we know now about the Constitution and what Eritrea has become since the Constitution was first drafted, there is no justification or excuse for him or others to call for implementation of the defunct Eritrea's 1997 Constitution. Let's now look at the actual text of the 1997 Constitution. Two of the most crucial articles from the 1997 Constitution has to do with the issue of identity and culture and the land and resource issues, which are very critical to the Afar people. The Article 9 of the 1997 Constitution talks about national culture. Article 9, number 1 reads, "The state shall be responsible for creating and promoting conditions conducive for developing a national culture capable of expressing national identity, unity and progress of Eritrean people." First of all, why is it the state's business and responsibility to create culture for Eritrea? Remember, it says to develop a national culture, not cultures. Remember here, Eritrea had not one but over 9 distinct cultures in existence prior to the independence of Eritrea. Which one of the 9 cultures is the Constitution is talking about? The idea behind Article 9 is very discriminatory and racist towards every other ethnicity and its culture. This article's aims is to create an all-embracing new Eritrean identity, a new national culture. In other words, it wants us all to embrace the Tigrinya culture. This article is about getting rid of Eritrea's multicultural, multi-ethnic diversity. It's about assimilation and Tigrinyanization of people like the Afar. This article is very problematic for our democratic future in Eritrea and obstacle for our unity today. Let's look at another article, Article 23, number 2 of the 1997 Constitution. It's about the right to property in Eritrea. This article declares all land, all natural resources below and above the surface of the territory of Eritrea belongs to the state. This article is allowing for expropriation of strategic coastal Afar territory, towns and villages, displacing indigenous Afar from Asab and coastal villages and salt fields in Makaka, for example. This is what exactly happening in Dankalia today. Eritrean regime has partnered with foreign corporations like Australia's potash mining giant, taking away Afar resources illegally, displacing the rightful owners from their land and properties in Eritrea. It is allowing for foreign governments like the UAE to illegally take away Afar properties, to freely land grab Afar traditional businesses and properties for their war in Yemen, for example. Dear compatriots and our democratic opposition groups in diaspora, I want you to realize your support for the implementation of articles like this, Article 23, number 2 of the 1997 Constitution. Articles like this would mean a displacement to Afar people from their homeland in Dankalia. It means more destruction of their livelihood and Afar economic activities, including coastal fishery. Your approval of articles like this fly in the face of our future democratic system and against property rights of all of our Eritrean citizens. Constitutions like this and enactments like these were used by the European colonialist settlers against the First Nations in America, Canada, Australia and other parts of the world. A colonialist does what a colonialist does. It destroys previously existing civilizations. They attack existing cultures and identities. It subjects indigenous people to poverty. This is what the current regime is doing in Eritrea to people like the Afar. If the 1997 Constitution were to be implemented today, it would mean the internal colonization of the Afar Nation in Eritrea. The 1997 Constitution does not work for Eritrea. It is a colonial document and a colonial ideology by the EPLF. Dear friends and compatriots, in the past 28 years, each and every one of our diverse Eritrean society have gone through enormous suffering, one of the worst chapters of human rights violation in the world. Each of us have a horrific story to tell, whether as individuals or as a group. As we reflect back on what has taken place in Eritrea for the past 28 years, our people, the indigenous Afar, have seen one of the worst chapters of ethnic persecution in our recent memory. Our leadership was mandated by the Afar traditional leaders to look into a specific allegation of crimes against humanity and ethnic cleansing against the state of Eritrea. We have documented the atrocities that took place in great detail. We have collected thousands of reports from Afar victims, survivors, and eyewitness accounts. We have organized those evidence into a book, made human rights complaints to that Eritrea is in fact removing the indigenous Afar from Dankalia using violence and systematic persecutions, mass murders, the extrajudicial killings of indigenous leadership, putting them into mass graves, the disappearance of hundreds of Afar traditional leaders, the attack on Afar customary law and cultural institutions, the destruction of Afar traditional economies, including a right to fish, the destruction of indigenous way of life, such as nomadic pastoralism, such as traditional salt mining, in using threats and discrimination and violence to forcibly evict Afar people from resource-rich and strategic coastal villages in Dankalia. What have taken place in Eritrea in the past 28 years against the Afar people is nothing less than cultural genocide and cultural appropriation. The violence and the systematic persecution have forced over 200,000 Afar people fleeing from their homes, businesses, and properties in Eritrea. Many of those refugees are now found in refugee camps in Ethiopia. Many others have died out of hunger and malnutrition. Others died in desperate attempt to cross the Red Sea into Yemen, Djibouti, and other parts of the world. The United Nations Human Rights Council assigned human rights investigators to look into crimes in Eritrea, look into crimes against Afar in Eritrea. The United Nations investigators have all confirmed that those atrocities are indeed happening in a large and organized manner. They confirmed our allegations that Eritrea is persecuting the Afar on ethnic grounds, and those crimes amount to crimes against humanity. Dear compatriots, there has not been any period in our long established history as indigenous people in this region that is more threatening to Afar existence and the identity, Afar identity, than the present day Eritrea. This is an urgent call to all of our Eritrean friends and colleagues to put aside their differences and protect the rights of the Afar and all of our marginalized people. We reject the assimilation of the Afar nation, the colonization of indigenous cultures, the Tigrinianization, the Amharization, and even the Arabization for that matter. You know, since the United Arab Emirates first arrived in the Afar territory in Assab in 2015, they have been involved in countless crimes against Afar nation. They have assisted the Eritrean regime financially and to take away Afar lands and properties illegally. They have financed our atrocities in Eritrea. They have systematically dismantled the indigenous Afar economic means. Specifically, they have restricted the traditional fishing on the Afar on the Red Sea coast. They have curtailed the freedom of movement and mobility of our indigenous fishermen. They have forcibly evicted indigenous Afar from their homes and businesses, such as salt mining properties in Assab, and turned those Afar businesses into a military base near Assab. They have attacked Afar fishermen violently and murdered them in their own homes, seacoast, and in their own fishing boats. To date, close to 100 Afar people have lost their lives due to UAE's violence and indiscriminate shooting and unarmed Afar people. Many others are missing. Some said to be believed to be held in the offshore secret prisons in Yemen and Eritrea. All of these crimes are, of course, happening with the collaboration and at the invitation of Eritrean government. Afar Nation reject the UAE presence in Dankalia. We denounce the murder of our innocent civilians and the kidnapping of our people by them. We reject the selling of Dankalia to them. We condemn Eritrea for making Afar lands available for land grabbing and the exploitation of our resources by foreign actors. The Afar have inalienable right to Dankalia. They have inalienable right to peace and security, to live in safety in Eritrea and Dankalia. They have inalienable right to land and resources. They have inalienable right to live and profit from the port of Assab.